right. So he's a porn addict now, the podcast. And we were talking about, we recorded, was he this way when we got married, when we first got married. And I remember that I got very excited and I said I had some stuff to share in the bonus content. And even since we said that, man, I feel like now I'm going to go off on a lot of tangents. So I would love for you to keep me on track. See, look at that. Look at me passing off the responsibility. I feel like that actually is probably one of the traits of somebody that struggles with an addiction, not taking ownership or accountability.
I like the authority.
Okay. All right. So here was my train of thought. Was he that way when we first met? And I think about this often, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this, but I'm going all therapist, psychology nerd and doing the whole thing where I think a lot of people that struggle with pornography as a coping mechanism, pornography addiction, impulse control disorder, any of those kind of things, there was always this belief that when we get married, then everything will be fine. Once we start having, regular sex, then everything's going to be great. And I won't look at porn at all. And then that will take care of that. And the reason I even start there is I feel like if I back that up, here's somebody that has not necessarily been dealing with their addiction or impulse control issues. And so it's always been it'll be better when, and it's that whole crystal ball future thinking. And so I just had my men's group last night and we were talking again about in that moment when it's somebody's last time, which how many last times does the addict have? That in that moment, they really do mean that this really is the last time. And yes. And we were talking about that concept, right? Where in that moment, it really is like, now I'm not going to do that anymore. I get it. I don't like the way I feel. And so then now I won't do it again. And so I feel like at some point when somebody is in a committed relationship, now they have almost this target that they can look toward. And so then sometimes they'll even let themselves go and say, all right, I got to get it all out of me because it is going to be gone when I get married. So, and I'm really excited about that. And so then I'm just going to look for this. And then that's, and that almost like calms their anxiety to think that, okay, at least it's going to be better when I get married. And so I kind of feel like that's one of the components. But if I go super nerdy, this is where I feel like when I talk about people that are turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms, be it porn or alcohol or food or games or any of those kind of things, that I really feel like I go big in my course, my program on there's these 5 voids in their life. And I break it down to they don't feel connected in their relationships, or their marriage. If they have kids, they don't feel good about their parenting. They maybe don't feel good about their connection to the divine or spirituality. They don't feel good about their career, and they don't feel good about their health. And so in my practice, I've gone and tried to find ways to address each one of these things. So then I feel like if you got the person that is saying, okay, when I get married, then everything's going to be better and I'm not going to want to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms again. But then typically that person probably didn't grow up seeing a very securely attached relationship with their parents. Or, I kind of feel like anybody that's our age or kind of anybody, quite frankly, at this point, their parents' marriage wasn't necessarily idyllic. So they don't see that this loving couple that communicates effectively all the time, that works through difficult things, where both of them take ownership of their part and they allow room for discomfort and emotions and feelings. And so that's where I feel like this genesis of they don't even really know what a healthy relationship looks like. So now everything's going to be magical when they're married. When they're married, they're not going to want to turn to porn. They're going to be having sex all the time. Their wife's going to desire it night and day and desire them and crave them. And they're also going to, get in great shape. They're finally going to make all this money. They're going to probably move into a place where all their friends are cool. They're probably going to jump higher. They're going to be able to sing songs really well, play the piano. I mean, it's all going to be better, Josh, when they get married.
So you have sat with guys who truly believe that their life will change by uttering the words "I do."
I mean, an innumerable amount of guys and women that do, and bless their hearts. I mean, and I think part of that is the story that we tell ourselves about the fairy tale that, and then I'll get the house and the white picket fence and the dogs that are barking in your background. Being hilarious, Josh, right?
When you have 4 of them, you can't run them.
No, you cannot. You cannot. But then they're going to have all those things and just everything's going to be better. And I feel like that's this, the brain really likes to say that things are always going to be better because then I don't have to self-confront or deal with things right now. And that's where if I blow my diet on Tuesday and I started on Monday, then next week it really is. Next Monday, it really is going to be better. Like I do understand now, but the next week rolls around and I did nothing from Tuesday to Saturday or Sunday other than still just go on a bender and eat every single thing I want and feel gross so that then I'll get that dopamine bump. But come Monday, that'll be good. But then Monday comes and it turns out I didn't learn any tools or any skills to sit with discomfort, to find more productive things to do with my time. And so it's just this, I like what you're saying. It's the words I do will be better. Everything's going to be better then. So that's maybe my opening salvo. I'd love to get your thoughts, and I've got plenty more thoughts, because I feel like that's the lies, the story our brain tells us. And then we get there. And then when it isn't better, now we also get to say, what's wrong with me? I must be broken. She must actually not care about me because it was supposed to all be better.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that, I'm very pragmatic. I'm very statistics driven when it comes to this stuff. And I just look at Dr. Patrick Carnes, one of his big studies where he found, this was with American men, I believe. He found that of sex addicts, and I assume this covers every type of sex addict, whether it's pornography or intercourse or exhibitionism, voyeurism, anything like that. I assume it covers the entire family of sexual disorders. But he said that, or he found in his research that over 70% of men had unresolved trauma based on physical abuse. Just over 80, when they were a child, just over 80% have some kind of unresolved trauma based on sexual abuse. And then it was something like 95%, right around there, had some kind of trauma based on mental, emotional, or spiritual abuse that took place in their youth. So theoretically, a guy should statistically fall into all three categories.
Yes.
But really, the odds of not falling into one are tiny. When you do the actual math on it, it's something like 3 out of 1,000 would not fall into one or more of those categories.
And two of those were lying. I would say 2 of those guys are lying. I mean, even when you're looking at like reported data, right?
Exactly. So, I look at this data and then I look at my life and I can say, yes, I absolutely there was some sexual abuse at the hands of a babysitter when I was very young. She was a huge source of mental and emotional abuse as well. And then there were a few other people in my life who served some emotional abuse up on a plate. And I know, based on going through recovery, that's where my trauma originated. And having sat in groups as a member, whether it's a 12-step group or whether it's rehab or just a men's group, that everybody I've ever met had some kind of trauma. Now with the clients who I coach, I've yet to find somebody who's that unicorn who didn't have the trauma. But that's trauma from childhood, and we're not getting married in childhood. So I think that the answer to was he like this has to be a resounding yes.
Yeah. No, and I love what you're saying. And it's funny because when you give those numbers, I mean, who am I to go against Patrick Carnes? I mean, he has that real data. I probably worked with I really feel like it's about 1,300 couples or more in the last 15 years or so. And and maybe it's just the population I work with, and maybe 1,600 individuals for pornography addiction. And I always assumed it would even be more sexual abuse than I run into, but that emotional abuse is absolutely there. And I feel like with mine, it's 100% of the time. And that's where I try to frame it as forgive our parents, for they knew not what they knew. They were, and I really do. I used to struggle with everybody's doing their best, because I thought, okay, I'm talking to people that actively neglect their kids and choose to do things otherwise. But then if you really step back, they're doing that because they don't know how to really parent their own kids, and they're hoping or assuming that things will just kind of work out, and they even worried that they'll
lack of tools passed down through the generations.
Yeah. So that's where I feel like that anchoring on but it will be better when, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe we can blame the media or social media, or we can blame somebody along with parents to just say, here's this idyllic fantasy thing that when people gaze into each other's eyes across the aisle and say, I do, and then everybody, claps and they run into the limo to go off on the honeymoon, it just makes it look like, and they live happily ever after. But then as a therapist, I mean, even just this week, processing some things about day 2 of the honeymoon where everything went south, and then it was all, then it was off from there, that kind of thing. So I agree. He was this way. He just didn't know what that way was. And he anticipated that it would go away. And then when it doesn't, then he also now is going to beat himself up because something must be wrong with him. if then things are still happening after the ring was placed on his finger. Because he was supposed to, I love what you said though, he was supposed to feel better. Everything was supposed to make sense. It was going to be easy at that point. So then the person gets an added layer of shame, I think, that they weren't anticipating at the point.
And let's make this clear that you cannot screw your way out of addiction.
Okay, that's a pull quote, my friend. Have you used that one before?
No, I never have. That's
okay,
I'm going to
it's true.
that one.
But that's true, because that's like, it'll be better if I just more. And I feel like, man, Josh, that's a great comment, because I feel like a guy does feel that way. I mean, no, because, and then oftentimes I'll have couples that almost like negotiate. Okay, she's willing to be more present because she feels like it'll never be enough. And the guy's like, actually it will, a couple times a week, and really it will. But then I already know where this one's headed. If it's a couple times a week, then the guy will say, I mean, so that was pretty good, right? So, I mean, you liked it too. So maybe 3 times would be good. What do you think? And then there she goes. She's like, okay, my opinion doesn't matter. So that's funny what you said.
And that's ultimately because what is being satiated with the pornography is not being satiated by intercourse.
Yeah.
I think that
talk about that. Yeah.
We make the connection because what are you watching with pornography? You're watching the act of intercourse. Mm-hmm. What are you doing with your spouse? The act of intercourse. So they become so closely linked, but I describe it as, it's as different as watching The Love Boat and going on a cruise. Those are totally different things.
I know that reference very well, but the kids these days, do they know what The Love Boat is, Josh?
Well, you know what? I hope so. I'd hate to think that classic TV is disappearing.
But I like your analogy, though. I've never thought of it that way.
It's like watching a baseball game on TV versus going to one.
I like where you're going with that, because I'll have guys that will say, even when they're trying to defend their porn viewing, they're like, no, I just like watching the ones where it's real. I know it's real. They seem like they care, and she desires him, and she's into it. And so I think, and then it's like in real life, okay, did you lock the door? Are the kids awake? Dog scratching or whatever. And it's like they still want this connection, and it's this deep connection, but that has to be earned. That has to be, time has to be spent as a couple in a relationship.
And there has to be intimacy. There has to be cooperation. There has to be collaboration.
Yes. Yeah.
Where when viewing porn, it's all power, it's all control for one person.
And the guy is creating a narrative. I mean, that's the thing that I find is interesting, because the guy in my office, I've heard that one, a tale as old as time of, okay, what's a Love Boat reference there? You can count on it as much as just Doc dating some woman who walks onto the boat. See?
Good reference.
Thank you. That the guy's already created this narrative of, no, I mean, I know it's porn, but I could really tell, she really digs him or whatever. And so I want my wife to look at me that way, and I want her to sound that way. And then if she doesn't, then all of a sudden he's back to I thought this was supposed to be like amazing and incredible. And I don't think the guy says it's me. He's like, he says to his wife, hey, can you like be a little more into it? Or can you, and now again, he's looking for that. I need you to make me feel better. And he needs to figure out himself on front, inside out, or else she's never going to be able to hit it just right.
Do you find that the guys eventually recognize this and admit it, that, I thought that it would be sexual Valhalla and we'd be doing it every day in every room. And then it turns out life is not like a porn movie, and they go back to their pornography to get what they need from there. Yeah. Do you get guys who are like, who admit they were wrong about that initial everything gets better at I do?
Okay. So I love these questions. This is a real fun format to talk about this, because I'm not just blasting out podcast episodes on this, but I get to talk about this in my men's group or in couple settings. So I think I'm pausing and hesitating because I do, but it's with a lot of work, because I still feel like if somebody's not, if they're coming in to talk to a therapist, even if they're coming in to say, hey, can you help her understand? If they're working with a good therapist or a good coach, like you've got that experience as well, where, that you already know, oh, you're chasing this sexual Valhalla that doesn't exist, that you've created this narrative thanks to porn, and so then I feel like that's at least a start, somebody coming in to get help, even if it's help their wife, there's an opportunity where they can self-confront, But I can honestly, Josh, remember, and this is one of the only times it's ever happened, but I remember a couple that came in one time, and it was years and years ago. I think I would have handled it so much differently, but he said, I'm here because I want sex once a day. And she does not. And I didn't know even a fraction of what I know now as a couples therapist. But then I did say, okay, well, she has thoughts around that too. And he's like, yeah, she doesn't want to. And we're here because I want it once a day. And then I said, okay, I can't guarantee that. And he literally left, never saw him again. And so I thought that one was interesting.
So with the original question being, was he like this when we first got together? I'd like to flip that around and ask you, in your experience, have you ever found somebody who became a pornography addict or became obsessive with pornography after they got married, and that's where the seeds were?
Okay. And I want to hear your thoughts on this too. So my initial gut reaction is no. I mean, that I have not seen somebody develop a intense porn addiction late. Now, I have had people claim that that is what has happened. But then if I get to work with that person individually, and I've been doing this a long time now. So if that, if I all of a sudden hear the guy say, oh no, I didn't even start looking until I was in my 20s, or whatever. And now, it's this daily occurrence. And who am I to say that isn't probably the reality of the situation? But I have found just from experience that then if I pull that guy in one-on-one, then eventually it's like, well, no, I've been looking at it my whole life because I really do feel like, and I never found this data. I was told one time at a training that it was if somebody didn't really start looking at porn until they were in 14, 15, 16, that they had not a healthier relationship with porn. That's the wrong phrase, but that it didn't have that hold, and I think this is when we talk about trauma. When I first started doing this work 20 years ago, it was almost like the term being sexualized meant molested, but,
Yeah.
And I know, right. Since then now sexualized is seeing porn at a young age,
And I think with marriage or really any live-in relationship that lasts a certain amount of while, you do get into routines, you do get into patterns. And I remember as a single person without any kids, my life was so much more spontaneous.
Yes.
And even though I was a porn addict then, I might, skip it and go drinking that night. Or I may go
mixing
racing.
things up. There you go.
Go-kart racing. I was always going after the adrenaline. I was always going after the dopamine. And I had so many ways to exploit the dopamine that I wanted to get. But once you get into that routine and to settle into a marriage or a long-term relationship, especially when you have kids, you're not really allowed or able to go-kart racing whenever you want. You can't be drunk around the kids or stumble home drunk. You can't do a lot of what you used to do as a single person. And I think that could make the addiction, the obsession of porn bubble up to the surface to the point where, oh my God, when we were dating, he wasn't even like this. And
that's a good point.
Now that we're married, he was really, hitting the porn hard.
Well, I like what you're saying because I talk so often about sitting with discomfort. And because if you can be spontaneous, you don't have to sit with discomfort. But if you're at home and the kids are asleep and it's quiet in the house and your wife's asleep and you have not scratched that adrenaline itch and you are feeling uncomfortable because you don't feel like you like your job or you don't feel like you really connected with your wife or you don't feel like you are being a good dad and then all that stuff kicks in, that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. And if as a single person, which number one, you didn't have to deal with all those variables, but you could go-kart racing. Now all of a sudden you're sitting in front of your computer and you're one tab over from getting rid of that discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And taking control of things.
Yeah. Not in a good kind of way.
Nope.
All right.
But so I think coming up to the end of the episode, I think we are both truly in agreement that he came to the relationship this way. It may have blossomed more than it did prior to the relationship or prior to the marriage, but everything was in place there. The ingredients were there. It was just a matter of time. And as we say so often, it had nothing to do with them and it's not their fault.